Was Gaddafi's plan to introduce a pan-African currency, which posed a significant threat to the global financial system. The Western powers, fearing the potential disruptions and loss of influence, felt compelled to remove Gaddafi from power at any cost.
Welcome to this channel, Global Happenstance. Here we react, reflect, and respond to the world's most viral videos and global trending events. From shocking headlines to inspiring moments, we break it all down, one reaction at a time. Stay tuned and don't forget to comment, share, and subscribe.
Libya, and Gaddafi was being taken down. A number of African presidents said, wait, hold. We will fly into Libya and we can have some kind of diplomatic conversations. The feedback from external actors to them was, if you fly into Libyan airspace, we cannot guarantee your security. I want you to think about that for a minute, that heads of state of the African continent were told this on our continent. And ladies and gentlemen, what is Libya today? And it happened on our watch.
In 2011, the NATO invasion of Libya and the subsequent killing of Muammar Gaddafi received widespread attention. The official narrative portrayed the intervention as a humanitarian effort aimed at safeguarding civilians. However, what if this explanation was merely a cover-up? What if there were underlying motives that were far more sinister? Leaked emails from Hillary Clinton, who served as Secretary of State at the time, may shed light on the true nature of the conflict. These emails allegedly reveal a shocking hidden agenda that had nothing to do with humanitarian concerns. This eye-opening video presents the evidence suggesting that NATO's war on Libya was primarily driven by monetary gain, power, and control over oil resources.
Who earns from Libya's resources? Libya was a wealthy nation, oil producing. Who earns today? Do we know in this room where Libya's money goes? Africa. Africa. We have to ask the questions. We must. We must.
It explores Gaddafi's plan to introduce a pan-African currency, which posed a significant threat to the global financial system. The Western powers, fearing the potential disruptions and loss of influence, felt compelled to remove Gaddafi from power at any cost. The release of classified files by Putin further adds to the revelations, promising to challenge our preconceived notions about the Libyan intervention. Before NATO's military intervention, Libya under Gaddafi experienced a period of prosperity. The Libyan people enjoyed free education, healthcare, and housing rights. This starkly contrasted with the impoverished state that Libya had been in the past. Gaddafi's most notable achievement was the Great Man-Made River Project, an extensive irrigation system that transformed arid land into fertile ground for agriculture. Additionally, Gaddafi established a state-owned bank that provided interest-free loans for development projects, liberating Libya from the burdensome debts imposed by international financial institutions such as the IMF and World Bank. Gaddafi's ambitions extended beyond Libya itself. He sought to export his country's successful economic model to the rest of Africa, aiming for true independence and self-sufficiency. This vision of African unity and prosperity posed a direct challenge to the Western powers. The audacity of a small nation like Libya defying their control over the global financial system was seen as a grave threat. Consequently, Gaddafi became a target that needed to be eliminated. Furthermore, Gaddafi envisioned the creation of a pan-African currency called the Golden Dinar as the centerpiece of his grand plan. This currency aimed to foster economic integration and independence across the African continent, reducing reliance on former colonial powers. Such a vision struck fear into the hearts of those who controlled the global financial system. In conclusion, the true reasons behind NATO's intervention in Libya in 2011 appear to go beyond mere humanitarian concerns. The evidence suggests that the conflict was motivated by the desire to maintain control over the global financial system and protect the interests of Western powers. Gaddafi's aspirations for economic independence, both for Libya and Africa as a whole, posed a direct challenge to the established order. The story of Libya under Gaddafi reveals a complex web of power struggles, economic ambitions, and attempts to preserve the status quo. The proposed new currency, the Pan-African Gold Dinar, aimed to be backed by Libya's substantial reserves of gold and silver. In an email dated April 2, 2011, Sidney Blumenthal, a close associate of Hillary Clinton, revealed the astonishing details. It was disclosed that Gaddafi's government possessed an enormous stockpile of 143 tons of gold and an equivalent amount of silver, valued at over $7 billion. This precious metal reserve was intended to serve as the foundation for the Pan-African currency. If successful, this move would have had a profound impact on the global financial system, which was predominantly dominated by the US dollar and European currencies like the French African franc. African nations had long been trapped using these colonial-era currencies, perpetually burdened by debt and exploited by their former imperial masters. However, the introduction of the Libyan dinar threatened to disrupt this status quo. The new currency offered Africa a genuine path toward economic sovereignty, freeing them from the constraints imposed by Western banking cartels. This symbolic break from monetary colonialism was deemed unacceptable by the established powers. The leaked emails also revealed the significant role played by France in the decision to overthrow Gaddafi. According to intelligence sources cited in the emails, French spies were the first to uncover Gaddafi's currency plan. This revelation sent shockwaves through the corridors of power in Paris. For French President Nicolas Sarkozy, Gaddafi's vision directly challenged France's interests in Africa. The emails outlined 5 key factors that motivated Sarkozy to spearhead military intervention in Libya. These factors included a desire to secure a larger share of Libya's oil production for French companies, to increase French political influence and dominance in North Africa, to bolster Sarkozy's domestic political standing in France, to provide an opportunity for the French military to assert its strength on the global stage, and most importantly, to address concerns that Gaddafi's Pan-African currency posed a threat to French monetary control over its former African colonies. For centuries, France had exploited its African territories through the French African franc. Gaddafi's plan jeopardized this crucial economic stranglehold. It is no surprise that Sarkozy felt compelled to take decisive action to crush this aspiring African maverick. To truly comprehend the groundbreaking implications of Gaddafi's Pan-African currency plan, it is necessary to understand the foundations of the global financial system. The current system is intricately woven with a complex web of debt, exploitation, and monetary manipulation orchestrated by a group of private banks and financial institutions. At its core lies the concept of fractional reserve banking, where banks can effectively create money out of thin air through the lending process. They can lend out a multiple of what is actually deposited, holding only a small fraction as reserves. World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement further consolidated this bank-created monetary system. Necessary to its core lies the concept of fractional reserve banking, where banks can effectively create money out of thin air through the lending process. They can lend out a multiple of what is actually deposited, holding only a small fraction as reserves. Following World War II, the Bretton Woods Agreement further consolidated this bank-created monetary system on a global scale. It established institutions like the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Bank to oversee and enforce the rules of this rigged game. However, the linchpin that holds this system together is the petrodollar system. Since the 1970s, global oil trade has been exclusively denominated in US dollars. This artificial demand for dollars enables the US to continuously accumulate debt while exporting inflation to the rest of the world. Any nation that dares to challenge this financial hegemony faces swift and brutal consequences. When Saddam Hussein of Iraq started selling oil in euros in 2000, it provided the perfect pretext for the US to unleash its shock and awe military campaign just 3 years later. Gaddafi's plan to trade Libyan oil freely in a new Pan-African currency posed an existential threat to the petrodollar system and its domination by the US dollar. It is no wonder that the financial elite felt so threatened by this African upstart. The US to continuously accumulate debt while exporting inflation to the rest of the world. Any nation that dares to challenge this financial hegemony faces swift and brutal consequences. When Saddam Hussein of Iraq started selling oil in euros in 2000, it provided the perfect pretext for the US to unleash its shock and awe military campaign just 3 years later. Gaddafi's plan to trade Libyan oil freely in a new Pan-African currency posed an existential threat to the petrodollar system and its domination by the US dollar. It is no wonder that the financial elite felt so threatened by this African upstart. Gaddafi wasn't the first leader to challenge the petrodollar system and face severe repercussions. Let's recall the year 2000 when Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein made a bold move that would seal his fate. Hussein announced that Iraq would no longer accept US dollars for oil payments, demanding payment in euros instead. This direct challenge to the global dominance of the dollar set off alarm bells in Washington. How dare a defiant nation like Iraq undermine the very currency that underpinned American economic might? Within 3 years, the US concocted dubious claims about weapons of mass destruction and launched its catastrophic invasion of Iraq in 2003. Saddam's real crime appears to be his attempt to liberate Iraq from the shackles of the petrodollar system. His execution at the hands of the new Iraqi governments served as a grim warning to any other nations considering defying the status quo. Gaddafi possessed a deep understanding of the power held by the petrodollar and its role in perpetuating Western economic imperialism. In the years leading up to the NATO intervention, he took steps to distance Libya from this rigged system. Libyan oil began to be sold in currencies other than the dollar, gradually diminishing the artificially inflated power of the currency. However, Gaddafi's most audacious plan was the creation of the Pan-African gold dinar. Had this currency gained traction across the resource-rich African continent, it could have ignited an unprecedented shift in global financial dynamics. Entire nations would have been liberated from their dependence on the US dollar and the exploitative Western banking institutions that controlled it. This initiative went beyond Libya. It directly challenged the entire existing global financial order that had kept Africa impoverished for centuries. It is no wonder that the financial elite viewed Gaddafi as an immense threat to their dominance. With the onslaught of NATO warplanes causing devastation, it quickly became apparent that the stated humanitarian objectives were merely a camouflage. The relentless bombing campaign targeted the very infrastructure that sustained ordinary Libyan civilians, displaying a chilling disregard for human life. One of the primary targets was the Great Man-Made River Project, which was Gaddafi's significant achievement in bringing a water lifeline to the cities and fertile regions of Libya. NATO bombs deliberately struck the pipeline itself, as well as the factories that produced the pipes necessary for repairs and maintenance. This was a cold-blooded attempt to cripple the vital irrigation system on which 2/3 of the population relied for water supplies and agriculture. Destroying the means of survival for millions of innocent people could hardly be labeled a humanitarian intervention. The destruction did not stop there. Schools, hospitals, and other civilian facilities faced repeated assaults from NATO bombardment. Even the humble residential homes of ordinary Libyans were not spared from the indiscriminate rain of high explosives. Ironically, it was the NATO forces themselves who were responsible for many of the civilian casualties they claimed to be preventing. Hospitals overflowing with wounded civilians stood as a grim testament to the harsh reality on the ground. As noted by Libyan writer Maximilian Fort, NATO's intervention arguably tilted the scales in favor of a new breed of human rights violators who would make Gaddafi appear tame. The leaked emails reveal that this widespread civilian suffering was not merely an unfortunate byproduct of war. It was a deliberate and calculated part of the conflict. The intentional tactic employed was to punish the Libyan people for daring to nurture dreams of independence and self-determination under Gaddafi's leadership. Humanitarianism played no role in this strategy. As the true extent of NATO's wanton destruction in Libya became apparent, one expert voice cut through the fog of war with a chilling assessment. Professor Maximilian Fort, in his meticulously researched book, Slouching Towards Cert, exposed the intervention's real objective: to disrupt an emerging pattern of independence and collaboration within Africa, which would facilitate increased African self-reliance. In essence, Gaddafi's grand vision of a united and self-sufficient Africa posed an existential threat not only to the global financial order, but also to the ability of Western powers to continue exploiting the continent's vast natural resources and human capital. How could a disparate group of insurgents swiftly establish such a complex financial institution amidst the chaos of war? The answer lies in the shadowy involvement of foreign interests and their determination to preemptively disrupt any progress towards true African economic sovereignty. A rebel central bank could rapidly reintegrate post-Gaddafi Libya into the very global financial system that the maverick leader had sought to escape. However, this issue extended beyond Libya. The leaked emails expose how Gaddafi's Pan-African ambitions sent shockwaves through the corridors of power in Paris, Washington, and other Western capitals. His aspirations for a gold-backed African currency threatened to weaken the stranglehold that European powers, such as France, had maintained over their former colonial territories for decades. Behind the facade of human rights and democracy lurked an age-old tale of imperial conquest and subjugation through economic domination. Africa's abundant mineral wealth, vast oil reserves, and inexpensive labor represented a treasure trove ripe for continued plunder by the West. Any movement towards genuine independence and self-determination had to be quashed, regardless of the human cost. In the aftermath of NATO's military onslaught and the gruesome lynching of Gaddafi himself, Libya was plunged into a state of chaos from which it has yet to fully recover. The nation of Libya became fractured along tribal and regional lines, descending into a protracted and bloody civil war. Various militias and factions fought for power, shattering the promised democracy and freedom. Ordinary Libyans found themselves trapped in a nightmarish cyclone of violence, lawlessness, and widespread human rights abuses. Reports from credible organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch documented alarming levels of torture, arbitrary detentions, kidnappings, and extrajudicial killings, which became disturbingly commonplace. Ironically, it was often the NATO-backed rebel forces who were responsible for some of the most heinous atrocities. These were the same forces portrayed to the world as liberators and champions of human rights. Thousands of detainees, including children, languished in squalid prisons without access to proper judicial review, serving as a grim reminder of this harsh reality. Amidst this turmoil, the country suffered from economic devastation and institutional collapse. Libya's vast oil wealth and economic potential were reduced to ruins, transforming the nation into more of a failed state than the prosperous and self-reliant nation that Gaddafi had fought to build. Yet, in the face of such catastrophic human suffering, the very leaders who had authorized the military intervention shamelessly engaged in a nauseating victory dance. Hillary Clinton's boastful declaration of "We came, we saw, he died," accompanied by a callous cackle, epitomized a complete disregard for Libyan lives. Her premature victory lap reflected imperial hubris and echoed the misguided proclamations of past Western leaders, convinced of their duty to civilize so-called barbarians. However, this time, it was NATO's firepower, rather than the burden of the white man, that systematically demolished a once prosperous nation. Amidst the fog of war and propaganda, the leaked Hillary Clinton emails stand as compelling evidence, exposing the true motives behind NATO's intervention in Libya. These candid communications shed harsh light on the real forces driving the decision to unleash destruction upon Gaddafi's regime. In email after email, there is a noticeable absence of humanitarian concern or outrage over alleged atrocities. Instead, discussions revolve coldly around monetary gains, oil, and raw geopolitical self-interest. Toppling Gaddafi is framed as a means to an end, an opportunity to solidify Western financial and resource domination over the entire African continent. This revelation strips away the lofty rhetoric used to sell the Libyan war to the public. Talk of freedom, democracy, and human rights becomes nothing more than a feeble cover, barely concealing the hard-nosed pursuit of power and profit. Foreign policy decisions of such magnitude were driven not by moral conviction, but by brutal calculations on how to preserve the global financial status quo. The lessons of Libya should serve as a chilling wake-up call to any nation daring to challenge the existing world order. The obliteration of Gaddafi's regime was a message written in blood, a stark warning that any serious threat to Western economic domination would be met with overwhelming military force. The restructuring of global trade routes and the control over vital resources become paramount on the economic chessboard. No nation's interests are too big or too small to be threatened when it comes to safeguarding the empire's dominance. Alarmingly, the leaked emails reveal the deep-rooted and systemic nature of this mindset within the foreign policy establishment. A diverse cast of influences, ranging from career bureaucrats to brazen corporate lobbyists, is ready to employ persuasion, coercion, and pressure to defend their vested interests worldwide. The ugly truth exposed in the Clinton emails should deeply trouble anyone who values peace, self-determination, and human life over the unadulterated pursuit of wealth and power. The destruction of Libya was not a humanitarian intervention, but a mercenary campaign driven by the pursuit of oil, gold, and the desperate need to preserve the financial harmony of the United States.
I was with Muammar Gaddafi when Gaddafi in 1999 advanced coming out of the OAU to the African Union with a vision of the United States of Africa. Muammar Gaddafi spent, listen to me, billions of dollars to create the African Union. Did you know that Gaddafi gave $300 million and the other African nations gave $100 million to put up a satellite so that we who call Africa don't have to go through Europe to get to Africa? And Europe was getting $500 million a year just by our telephone calls to the continent. Now we can call directly to Africa, and that $500 million is in the hand of African people. Did you know that Muammar Gaddafi was setting up an African development bank with $70 billion in the African Development Bank from Libyan oil money? That we would not have to borrow money from the IMF and the World Bank at these exorbitant rates. Zero interest under Islamic non-usury teachings. I just left St. Kitts, and in the island of St. Kitts, he was going to set up a Caribbean Development Bank. He told the Prime Minister there and he was going to put $1 billion in that bank for Caribbean development. Why do you think they killed him? You think they killed him because he killed his people? Hell no. They killed him because, listen to me real good, you touched my nerve with that question. Did you know that in Libya, nobody's homeless? Listen, everybody in Libya has either a home or an apartment. They call it a flat. Did you know education in Libya is free from kindergarten through college? And did you know that if a Libyan wanted to come to America to be educated, the government in Libya paid for their education? Did you know that? I was there when he opened a $500 million hospital with 18 theaters for operation. I was there, and we went when he was making their own medicines. See, this was a man that gave free medical attention to all the citizens of Libya, and if Libya did not offer that kind of medical attention, they could fly anywhere in the world and get it, and the Libyan government would pay for it. Did you know that? No, you didn't. Did you know that from the oil money, every Libyan citizen got a stipend every year? And did you know that that man had no debt? Everything in his country was paid for. See? Now, when you got a man that did that for an African nation and was trying to do that for all Africa, how do you think Europe felt about it?
We are raised by the ones who know what to do.